The airport battle in Civil War was built on a decommissioned German airfield. No real terminal was used at all. The Russo brothers faced a genuinely unprecedented challenge. How do you stage a battle involving 12 superheroes across a full international airport when no real airport will let you film there? The answer was a creative hybrid. The production secured a decommissioned airfield in Erfurt, Germany, giving actors and stunt performers real tarmac to work on. Production designer Owen Patterson's team then built physical set pieces, terminal facades, jet bridges, ground equipment, to give performers physical reference. Everything beyond that was digitally extended by VFX teams, including Luma Pictures, creating the full airport geography audiences saw on screen. So that sprawling international terminal? Mostly pixels. Expensive, meticulously crafted pixels. It set a new standard for MCU production scale. Sony almost kept Spider-Man out of the MCU entirely, and the deal nearly collapsed more than once. For years, Sony held the film rights, and Marvel could only watch as the character stayed separate from the shared universe. When talks finally succeeded in early 2015, the compromise was delicate. Sony kept distribution rights and profits, while Marvel took creative control. Then came casting. Tom Holland beat out a short list of strong candidates, including Asa Butterfield, in a process where his chemistry with Robert Downey Jr. during screen tests proved decisive. Nothing says you got the job like impressing a man in a metal suit. The Russo brothers and Kevin Feige specifically wanted a younger Peter Parker, and Holland, just 19 during filming, delivered exactly that energy. The youngest major live-action Spider-Man, secured through one of Hollywood's most complicated corporate negotiations. Scarlett Johansson and her stunt doubles performed the Lagos chase on real Nigerian-styled sets built in Atlanta. The opening of Civil War needed to accomplish something specific, establish that even the Avengers' best efforts cause real-world harm. Achieving that required a sequence that felt grounded and chaotic rather than superheroic. Stunt coordinator Sam Hargrave, who would later direct Extraction, built the Lagos chase around a combination of Johansson's own performance and stunt double Heidi Moneymaker's wire-assisted work. The explosion that ends the sequence combined practical pyrotechnics with digital extension, while wire removal was handled frame by frame in post. So the sequence that launches a 117-nation political crisis was filmed in Georgia. Democracy is fragile. By the way, if you guys like movie content like this, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks. The de-aging technology used on Downey for the MIT flashback was more advanced than anything Marvel had attempted before. When the Russo brothers needed a young Tony Stark for Civil War's opening scene, they faced a technical challenge that went beyond previous MCU de-aging work. The sequence required Downey to deliver a genuine, emotional performance, while VFX teams simultaneously reconstructed his face as it appeared in the late 1980s. Lola VFX, Marvel's specialist de-aging vendor, used tracking markers, archival reference footage, and digital facial reshaping to achieve the effect. The Russo brothers noted the advancement over the Michael Douglas de-aging in Ant-Man. Downey's sequence involved more complex expressions and longer screen time. Aging is optional when your VFX budget is large enough. The result grounded the film's emotional stakes before a single action scene had occurred. The Zemo in Civil War shares almost nothing with his comic counterpart. It was a deliberate creative overhaul. In Marvel Comics, Baron Zemo is a purple-masked Prussian aristocrat and Hydra leader, exactly the kind of theatrical supervillain that screenwriters Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely decided Civil War didn't need. Their version is a Sokovian intelligence officer whose wife and son were killed in the Battle of Sokovia, a man whose entire plan is built on grief rather than ideology. Daniel Bruhl was cast specifically because the Russo brothers wanted someone who could project quiet, methodical menace. They'd seen it in his work on Rush. So they took the guy with the purple mask and turned him into a grieving father with a USB drive, and somehow that's more frightening. The result was a villain who never throws a punch at a hero and still wins. Boseman learned an entirely new movement style and accent with only weeks of preparation before filming began. Introducing Black Panther in someone else's movie, with no standalone film yet made and no established audience familiarity, was one of the most demanding character debuts in MCU history. Chadwick Boseman approached it with extraordinary thoroughness. He worked with a dialect coach to develop T'Challa's Xhosa-influenced accent, a choice that would carry through to the standalone film. He trained in martial arts traditions designed to make T'Challa's movement style visually distinct from every other hero on screen. So while everyone else was learning their blocking, Boseman was essentially building an entire culture from scratch. He researched the comic's characterization to build a consistent internal life for a king whose world hadn't yet been fully designed. The result was a character who felt complete from his very first scene. Paul Rudd was filmed separately and composited using techniques that had never been used at this scale in the MCU. The Giant Man reveal in Civil War was designed to be a genuine audience surprise, and keeping it secret was only half the challenge. The other half was making a 60-foot man look physically convincing in a sequence already packed with 11 other heroes. Rudd filmed his performance at normal scale on the airport set, with VFX teams digitally scaling his footage and integrating it with the surrounding action. The most technically demanding element was Spider-Man's interaction with Giant Man. Tom Holland's movements had to be precisely motion-matched against the digital giant. A teenager from Queens took down a 60-foot man using a reference to The Empire Strikes Back. Cinema has never been more efficient. The result felt physically coherent, despite being almost entirely constructed in post-production. The writers researched real international arms treaties to make the Sokovia Accords feel legally grounded. One of Civil War's most significant achievements is that its central political conflict doesn't have an obvious right answer, and that was entirely intentional. Screenwriters Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely researched real international frameworks, including UN peacekeeping protocols and arms control treaties, to build the Accords as a document that could plausibly exist. The 117-nation agreement detail, the specific accountability mechanisms, the genuine tension between oversight and autonomy, all designed to make both Tony Stark's support and Steve Rogers' opposition feel intellectually defensible. They wrote a fake international treaty so convincing that fans are still arguing about it a decade later. The writers drew on real debates around drone warfare and non-state actor accountability. The result is a MacGuffin that actually holds up to scrutiny. The Russo brothers deliberately stripped away music and spectacle to make the Siberia fight feel like a personal tragedy. After the airport battle's spectacular 12-hero choreography, the Russo brothers made a counterintuitive choice for Civil War's finale. They made it smaller. The Siberia bunker sequence was designed not as a superhero fight, but as three people in a room destroying something irreplaceable. The choreography is deliberately desperate and unglamorous. Henry Jackman's score pulls back to near silence. No triumphant theme, no crowd-pleasing finish, just Tony Stark watching his parents die and turning to look at Steve Rogers, who already knew. There's no resolution. Tony is defeated, Steve walks away without his shield, Bucky loses his arm. The Russo brothers built the entire sequence around that single emotional truth and let everything else serve it. Every detail of Cap's Civil War suit was chosen to signal he no longer works for any government institution. Costume designer Judiana Makovsky faced a specific challenge with Steve Rogers' Civil War suit. It needed to look like something a man maintains himself rather than something issued by a government agency. The solution was deliberate visual degradation. Darker color saturation, a more muted star emblem, a worn quality absent from the brighter Age of Ultron version. The Russo brothers wanted audiences to register Rogers' independent status visually before it was established narratively. When your costume is doing the political commentary, you know your production design team is working overtime. The arc continues. The suit gets progressively darker across subsequent films, until Infinity War, where the star is gone entirely. Cap's ideological journey is written in his costume. A deleted Tony Stark funeral scene would have reframed his entire arc in the film, and it was cut late. Among Civil War's deleted scenes, one stands out for what it would have added: Tony Stark attending Peggy Carter's funeral. The scene would have placed Tony in the same grief-laden space as Steve Rogers at the film's emotional opening, establishing a shared vulnerability before their ideological conflict hardened. The Russo brothers cut it for pacing. The film's first act was already carrying significant setup weight, so they removed the scene that would have made Tony's arc more sympathetic and then spent years listening to audiences debate whose side was right. Bold strategy. Some analysts argue the cut cost the film a layer of tragic irony. Two men mourning the same woman, about to tear each other apart. Tom Holland filmed airport scenes under a fake production name and was kept off all official call sheets. Keeping Spider-Man's MCU debut secret was one of Marvel's most significant secrecy challenges, and they actually pulled it off. Holland has described the strict confidentiality protocols governing his Civil War filming, including NDAs, code names for Spider-Man scenes in production documentation, and explicit instructions not to discuss his casting publicly. The production used working titles to obscure the character's presence in scheduling documents. This is the same Tom Holland who would later confirm plot points in interviews before the films were released. The fact that they kept his debut secret for months is, in retrospect, a minor miracle. Spider-Man's appearance wasn't confirmed until the November 2015 trailer, months after filming wrapped. The Berlin stairwell fight was designed to show three completely different fighting styles colliding simultaneously. Introducing Black Panther as a credible physical force required a specific choreographic strategy. Put him up against two fighters the audience already knows are exceptional, and show him match both of them. Stunt coordinator Sam Hargrave worked with the Russo brothers to build the Berlin chase around three visually distinct combat languages: T'Challa's acrobatic, claw-based panther style, Bucky's brutal, economical winter soldier technique, and Steve's shield-based defensive fighting. Boseman performed significant portions himself, his extensive movement training evident in the sequence's agility. The result accomplished exactly what it needed to. Audiences who had never seen Black Panther fight left the sequence with an immediate, visceral understanding of who this character was. 3 fighting styles, 1 scene, 0 ambiguity. Kevin Feige pushed for Rhodey's injury to carry forward permanently, overruling suggestions to heal him by the next film. When War Machine falls from the sky during the airport battle, it's one of Civil War's most genuinely shocking moments, and Marvel made a deliberate decision to keep it that way. Feige has discussed the choice to make Rhodey's spinal injury permanent, a decision that ran counter to the typical MCU pattern of heroes recovering between films. The injury carries forward into Infinity War and Endgame, where Rhodey uses leg braces built by Tony Stark. Most MCU heroes walk off catastrophic injuries by the next scene. Rhodey gets a permanent disability and a quiet dignity that's more affecting than most superhero arcs. The permanence serves the film's central argument, that the Avengers' conflicts have real, lasting costs. The Russo brothers insisted on real Berlin locations to give the film a spy thriller aesthetic, unlike other MCU movies. When the Russo brothers approached Civil War, they had a clear aesthetic reference point: the political thrillers of the 1970s. Films like 3 Days of the Condor that used real institutional architecture to make their political conflicts feel grounded and credible. Filming on location in Berlin was central to achieving that. Real European architecture carries a weight and specificity that constructed sets struggle to replicate. The sense that these political institutions actually exist, that these consequences are happening in the real world. When your superhero film looks like a Cold War espionage thriller, you've either made a creative masterstroke or you've forgotten to put the capes in. Production designer Owen Patterson worked with the Russo brothers to select locations that reinforced the film's spy thriller texture throughout. Peter Parker's bedroom contains hidden references that directly set up plot points in Spider-Man: Homecoming. The Queen's apartment scene in Civil War does a remarkable amount of character work in a very short time, and much of it is in the background. Peter Parker's bedroom is a carefully curated environment. Science fair trophies, academic materials, a Lego Death Star, and, crucially, homemade web shooter prototypes that establish he's been developing his technology independently before Tony's arrival. Tony Stark shows up with billion-dollar resources and finds a teenager who's already halfway there, using what appears to be craft supplies and determination. Every detail reinforces the same characterization: a brilliant, working-class Queens kid figuring it out alone. That characterization carries directly into Spider-Man: Homecoming, where Peter's modest circumstances and independent ingenuity are central to the story. Jackman deliberately deconstructed Cap's heroic theme into dissonant fragments to mirror the team's fracture. Henry Jackman faced an unusual compositional challenge with Civil War. How do you score a superhero film where the heroes fighting each other is the tragedy rather than the triumph? His solution was deliberate musical deconstruction. Rather than the triumphant orchestral language that typically accompanies MCU action sequences, Jackman used fragmented, dissonant versions of established themes to signal that something was fundamentally broken. Other MCU composers were writing victory fanfares. Jackman was writing a eulogy. The airport battle carries a bittersweet undercurrent that undercuts its own spectacle. The Siberia sequence pulls back to near silence. It's one of the MCU's most sophisticated uses of music as narrative tool rather than emotional underlining. Everett Ross was nearly a much larger antagonist in early Civil War drafts before the role was scaled back. Martin Freeman's casting as Everett Ross brought a specific quality the Russo brothers wanted: the experience of an ordinary, capable human navigating a world that has dramatically exceeded normal parameters. Ross in the comics is a State Department attaché assigned to monitor T'Challa. The film version recasts him as a CIA operative, but retains the fundamental dynamic of a government professional trying to maintain institutional control over events beyond institutional comprehension. Freeman also appears in Sherlock alongside Benedict Cumberbatch, who plays Doctor Strange in the MCU. The two actors appear in the same franchise without sharing a single scene in Civil War, which is either a missed opportunity or a very expensive coincidence. Freeman has discussed finding the ordinary human dynamic compelling, and the role was always conceived as a foundation for Black Panther. No other MCU film had attempted to track 12 distinct hero power sets in a single continuous sequence before. The airport battle set a new benchmark for superhero ensemble action, and the challenge of making it visually coherent was immense. 12 heroes, each with unique visual effects requirements, each needing to be legible to audiences in a sequence running approximately 15 minutes. VFX supervisor Dan DeLue coordinated multiple vendors, Luma Pictures, Frame Store, and others, across carefully divided shot assignments. The Russo brothers and editor Jeffrey Ford managed the visual complexity editorially, structuring the sequence around smaller hero groupings rather than attempting to show all 12 simultaneously. 12 superheroes? Zero confusion. Meanwhile, most films struggle to track two characters through a revolving door. Extensive previs work planned every camera angle and action beat before filming. The result was a sequence that felt chaotic and exciting without ever becoming incoherent. What makes Baron Zemo genuinely distinctive among MCU villains is that his plan works completely. He doesn't fight the Avengers, he studies them. Screenwriters Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely built Zemo's manipulation around a specific psychological insight. Grief and guilt create predictable vulnerabilities, and betrayal by a trusted person is uniquely devastating in ways that external attack never is. Tony Stark's guilt over his parents, Steve Rogers' loyalty to Bucky, the specific wound of learning that Steve already knew. Zemo identifies each pressure point and applies force precisely. Marcus and McFeely have discussed wanting the plan to feel psychologically credible, not just dramatically convenient. Most MCU villains bring an army. Zemo brought a USB drive and a better understanding of human psychology than any therapist in the franchise. The result is a villain whose victory feels inevitable in retrospect, which is exactly what makes him so effective. If you enjoyed this, I post movie content a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.